It's no secret, the great US locomotive is working at full speed. After 10 years of uninterrupted growth, the North American economy is enjoying a wonderful moment. The unemployment rate lies below 4%, its lowest level since the year 2000, and every month more than 100,000 new jobs are created. Salaries are also growing, and in the last 3 years alone, almost 8 million jobs have been created. In addition, industrial production and exports are at historically high levels. Even in spite of their last stumble, the S&P 500 has exploded in recent years. The locomotive is absolutely soaring ahead. But hold on a second, because the US economy has another face, and it's a face we've already spoken about here on VisualPolitik. Dear viewers, the American economy, especially the government, is addicted to credit and debt. You heard that right. You see, September the 30th, 2018 marked the end of the federal government's budget year. And here's a question for you. Can you tell me how much the federal debt increased by in this year alone?
Actually, it's about $4,000.
500, 700, 800,
850, 870, 890, 895, 897, 898.
The answer is no less than $1.3 trillion. This amount surpasses the entire Mexican GDP.
We are living on borrowed money and borrowed time. These deficits hike interest rates, clobber exports, stunt investment, kill jobs, undermine growth, cheat our kids, and shrink our future.
It's time to ask why it is that we have run up more debt in this country in the last 8 years than we did in the previous 200, and to make sure it never happens again.
And we're only talking about the federal government here. The economy is growing, but the public deficit is out of control. By the way, just in the last year with Donald Trump in the White House, government spending grew by 7%. And it looks like things are going to get worse, much worse. Congress's budget office estimates that if they stay on this path, in less than 10 years, interest payments alone will cost the federal government more than $900 billion every single year. However, the federal government isn't the only debt junkie. Listen to this.
The states, the hidden debt.
The economy grows and incomes grow. In 2017, 39 of the 50 states that make up the United States had surpluses. That is, they made more money than they spent. After years of adjusting, now the question that many governors are asking themselves is, well, what's the best way to spend all of this money? And on top of that, since 2010, every state's collection has increased by 40%. So we're really not talking about just a few cents here. Finally, states have resources to invest in infrastructure, education, social services, etc. And this might all sound pretty good, right? Well, sadly, the truth is a little different. In fact, it's actually quite a lot different. You see, in principle, every state except for Vermont has to have a balanced budget. However, despite this, and all the apparent announced surpluses, the truth is that all of the states won't stop accumulating debt, obligations, and liabilities of all kinds. In fact, nowadays, every state drags, according to the think tank Truth in Accounting, a heavy load of more than $1.5 trillion in unfunded debt. The result is that the vast majority, no less than 40 of the 50 states, don't have the resources to face all of the commitments that they've gotten themselves into. But hold on a second here, because how the hell can states accumulate debt while their budgets are balanced? Well, basically by doing all kinds of accounting tricks. After all, politicians and elected officials are most interested in masking their figures and spending every penny. I mean, if we're honest about it, this is kind of how elections are won. To do so, they use many tricks, from inflating income assumptions to delaying bill payments, but the most important trick of all is one that has to do with pensions and benefits for public employees when they retire. Allow me to explain. In order to gain votes and get along with unions, state governments tend to promise public employees very good pensions as well as lots of additional benefits upon their retirement. So given how the pension system works in the United States, it's assumed that each month state governments have to contribute the amounts they committed to a pension fund so that tomorrow all those public workers can collect the pensions that they were promised. However, just for a second, let's put ourselves in the place of the politicians in charge of the state government. What if instead of depositing all that money into a pension fund, we invest in all kinds of public spending programs? That way we can finance a lot of projects which will make us win lots of votes. Okay, so some of you might now be thinking, in fact, all of you are now probably thinking, well, what's going to happen to all of those employees when they start retiring and claiming those pensions and those benefits? How are they going to be paid? And the answer is, it doesn't really matter. Remember, you're a politician. That's going to be someone else's problem way down the line. You just need to worry about winning the next election. Well, folks, according to the data, it really looks like that is actually the thought that many state politicians have had.
State and local governments made big commitments, particularly on pensions and retiree healthcare, but didn't adequately fund those liabilities. Mr. Brennan, a Democrat and mayor of Hartford.
In total, only regarding unfunded state pensions, the state debts already exceed $800 billion. The big question is knowing how the hell they're going to be able to cope with this huge amount of debt. But of course, not every state is the same, so listen up.
The best and worst.
If we think about it for a moment, it's easy to understand. Politicians have a gigantic incentive to spend every last penny. After all, their entire future depends on the next election cycle. That's why it's so important. In fact, it's absolutely essential to not only have counterweights, but also for civil society to be attentive and very demanding. But let's go back to the case of the United States. As we've seen, they are dragging a colossal unfunded debt of $1.5 trillion. However, not every state is in the same situation. Out of the country's 50 states, at least 40 don't have enough assets today to face all of their obligations. Of course, though, some states are better off than others. And in any case, there are 10 states where politicians have been responsible enough to guarantee their state's future and keep their accounts in order. Well, these are the 10 states that really did their homework, and we think they've earned the right to actually get a mention. They would be Alaska, North Dakota, Wyoming, Utah, South Dakota, Idaho, Tennessee, Nebraska, Oregon, and Iowa. As you can see, almost all of them, with the exception of Oregon and Iowa, are strongly Republican states. And Democrats should really start looking at this. The fact is that all the other states currently have a negative balance. Of course, to get a better idea of what we're talking about, let's take a look at the following graph. This shows the top 5 and bottom 5 states. The data is expressed in dollars per taxpayer, and yep, you are looking at it right. While states such as North Dakota, Wyoming, and Iowa have been responsible and have accumulated enough savings to meet all of their obligations and even have surpluses to invest and benefit each state, Illinois, Connecticut, and New Jersey are dragging a terrifying load of more than $50,000 per taxpayer. But of course, at this point, the question is, well, how on earth are all those states going to be able to cover their obligations? The answer isn't simple, because the situation of some states, as we saw in the case of Illinois, Connecticut, and New Jersey, is so bad that finding a solution is really hard. Check this out. In New Jersey's case, which is the worst off of all the states, the fiscal hole amounts to almost $200 billion. That is to say, this hole, which belongs to a state that has a little over 9 million inhabitants, is larger than the economy of Qatar and almost as big as the economies of countries like New Zealand or Peru. It's pretty damn crazy. In any case, what we can say is that ultimately there are only two possible ways to solve this. Either they raise taxes or they cut spending. The problem is that raising taxes may not even be an option because it can damage the state's economic potential and drive away taxpayers, especially those who have large fortunes. That's precisely what happened in Connecticut, where in recent years a lot of big businessmen have fled the state because of high taxes in comparison to other territories within the US. And it wasn't only Connecticut. In 2016, the last year for which we have data, 600,000 people moved from the 25 states with the highest taxes to the 25 states with the lowest taxes. And after Donald Trump's latest fiscal reform, it really looks as if this process is going to speed up. But that's something we're going to talk about in a future video. So far, you can see that the debt addiction is far from being an elusive federal government problem. The US economy is going strong, but this is the other side of the coin. The truth is that for the country's growth to remain sustainable, both the federal government and the state governments need to finally start taking the whole deficit and public debt issue very seriously. It is not normal for a country with such a high amount of growth to have so many public account imbalances. And this leads to big questions like, what's going to happen when it all goes wrong? And what's the limit to having so much debt? Because folks, let's not forget, sooner or later, in one way or another, public debt always has to be paid. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos. Also, do not forget to check out our friends at Reconsider Media. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, this channel, of course, is possible because of patrons and our patrons on that platform. Please consider joining them and supporting our mission of providing independent political coverage. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.
500, 700, 800.
850, 870, 870, 890, 895, 897, 898.